Hey everyone, so I still had these same supplies laying out on my desk from the previous couple of cards, which as always, if I remember, I will link to them in the annotations on the video. But yeah, I wanted to use my All About Teachers stamp set again, and I came up with kind of a fun idea to use it and this image. So I'd practice it on some scrap paper before making this card to see if it would even work, and it did. So I die cut a piece of CC Designs Copic Quality cardstock with the Blueprints 1 dies from My Favorite Things. That's what I showed at the very beginning. And then I'm using my stamp positioner and I inked up the large teacher stamp from the All About Teachers set and stamped it along the bottom of the cardstock. And then I'm inking up, this is Roberto's Amiga's Miss B image. And I'm using the stamp positioner for this as well. This is like a massive stamp positioner card. And you pretty much need it for something like this to get everything lined up. So got that on the stamp positioner. It's a little bit tricky with such a large image and this specific acrylic block. I don't even know where it came from. I've had it for years, but it's a bit of a smaller block, like thickness wise, so it's kind of hard to hold. But you just have to have a steady hand. And then I stamped her so that it looks like she's standing on top of the letters there. And then I wanted to add the second sentiment, which says for a special. So I inked it up, stamped it on the stamp positioner, then cleaned it off really, really well. Made sure I rubbed my hands against it to make sure there's no moisture on it or anything. And then I only want to ink up just the first word, the for. And I find it's easiest to hold my ink pad sideways, and same with my stamp. And then that way I can see what part of the stamp I'm inking up. If that really bothers you, you can just use a piece of tape to cover up the areas of the stamp that you don't want inked, and then you peel the tape off and stamp it. But this way, using that and the positioner, I get just the first part of the sentiment stamped, and then I cleaned it off really well again, and then this time I'm only inking up the second part of the sentiment. So get that all inked up, and then I'm going to use the stamp positioner with the original sentiment that I had inked up on there, and get that part lined up, and then that way I've got it so that it's not being stamped over the little main image here. Wouldn't really matter, you could stamp it over, but I took the extra minute there to separate it and just give it a little bit more effort, I guess. So once I was done with that, now I can kind of speed up the video a little bit and color her in with my Copic markers. So nothing totally groundbreaking with this. I used only 2 skin tones again this time instead of my usual 3. So I just used E21 and E13 and got her all colored in. With her glasses, I just kind of really lightly scribbled on the E21 on the one lens there, and then a tiny bit where you can see just a bit of her cheek. But I didn't want to completely fill it in to kind of give the impression that like there's glass there, so it always looks a little different, I guess is the way to explain it. I don't know, that's just how I do it. So did that and then added a little bit of R20 for her cheeks and her lips. And then for her hair, I'm using E44, 47, and 49, working lightest to darkest, and just flicking the color in to look more like, you know, the strands of hair. So I find with something like this, and especially with a short-haired image, it can really help to kind of turn the image facing you so that all your flicks are kind of in the same direction. So just kind of back and forth. I worked lightest to darkest, and then I go back in with like the medium color and lighter color until I'm happy with it, and leaving a little bit of the white area so it kind of gives it more of a highlight. So really simple and kind of fun to do, and yeah, it just looks good. So when I did that, I went on to color the rest of her outfit. So I'm using B95, 97, and 99 to color in her little turtleneck and parts of her shoes. I find with these ones, I have a really hard time getting the colors blended without them bleeding everywhere, but I think part of it is also because these markers, even after all these years, these certain colors are very juicy because I don't use blues very often for some random reason. So I find with markers I don't use very often that have a lot of ink in them, they tend to want to just go everywhere. So a light touch is really good. And same with reds. Like I use reds a lot, but reds are a color you need to use a lighter touch with because red just likes to get everywhere. And it's not just Copics, it's with any like dye ink, markers, stamping, anything. Red has a tendency to just go. It can get really annoying and can just smear really easily. So you always want to use a lighter touch with reds. So for the reds, I used my favorite combo, which is always R24, R27, and R29. and colored in her little like cardigan and the apple and the tips of her shoes. I thought I'd give her kind of fun shoes, even though she's supposed to be a teacher. Like, you gotta have fun shoes. So did that, and then again, I'm going off of the pattern paper from the Simple Story Smarty Pants pack, and there's kind of a lighter greeny aqua color, so that's what I took inspiration for her little folder, and like the swirls on it kind of made me think of just swirling colors. So I just basically dabbed 3 different colors on there, and then it was G12, G14, and BG15, and left it at that. So colored in the last little details, and obviously I left her skirt completely bare. I wanted to paper piece that. This is a perfect image for paper piecing if you're not used to it or want to start out with something simple, because it's like almost straight cuts. So really simple, not any detail cutting at all. Just stamped it onto the pattern paper and then quickly trimmed it out with my scissors. I always trim just on the very edge there so that there's no pattern paper past the lines. And then, of course, you got to add a little bit of shading and depth. So I took W3 and added some shading down along the edges of her skirt. And then, because this is a darker pattern paper, I actually took W5 and added just a little bit more. Just finishes it off and keeps that pattern paper from just like floating and not fitting with everything else. And then since there's those 2 little dots, I was not going to cut those out or, you know, anything, because that's just ridiculous. So I just took my one of the red markers, I think R27 or 29, and just dab that over them just to give them a little bit of color. And then pop that on with a bit of Tombow Mono Multi. And you never want to put on too much liquid adhesive. A little bit will go a long way because you don't want it oozing out the sides and ruining everything you just colored. Oh, and that was something I wanted to mention. That's why I did all this stamping ahead of time. Stamp the sentiments and everything else before coloring the image, because I wanted to make sure I had everything lined up and straight before I went to all the effort of coloring it, and then, you know, then stamp the sentiments and have them be crooked and waste all that time. So something like this, I stamp everything first, then I go to the coloring. So once I was done with all that, I just used my W3, W1, and W00 markers to add a little bit of shading just along the bottom of the teacher there and along the sides. And then I'm using my favorite things fishtail flags dynamics. This piece here, this is like 2 sets of dynamics. There's the fishtail flags and the fishtail flags layers. I only used the 3 smallest of the fishtail flags. This is how I keep them stored though all together. So that is 2 sets. And I die cut a couple of pieces of pattern paper and then just a piece of navy cardstock with those smallest dies, and then adhered them with my ATG, and then I just flip over the cardstock and trim off the pieces that were hanging over the edge. And then I used the Blueprints 2 set to cut the larger piece. Like I said in the previous video, I'm totally obsessed with these dies now. So die cut the matting layer from some red cardstock and then adhered those together. So I got a nice little red border. And then I've got my card base, which is CC Designs Covet Quality 110 pound cardstock. So 4 1/4 by 11 inches, and then scored at 5.5. So it's a standard A2 size card. So I'm going to adhere this. I thought about adhering it with some foam tape and popping it up, but for today's card I decided just to keep everything flat. So this would be a nice one you could mail easily without having to pay any extra for postage. And then for the inside sentiments, again, my All About Teacher set and the stamp positioner. You really, if you're gonna get into my sentiment stamps because they're rubber, a stamp positioner is like worth its weight in gold. I get so much use out of this thing. I don't even know, most of the time I don't even put it away. I just keep it out on my desk all the time. It just makes things so much easier. So inked up the first little sentiment there and stamped it along the bottom of the inside, and then inked up the thank you part and stamped that above it. And then I die cut a few more little fishtail flags from the same pattern papers and the same navy cardstock. And again, I made sure the tops of them were straight, and then I adhere them just below the crease line there for the fold so that the card closes easily and doesn't catch on those little pieces of pattern paper. And then to completely finish it off, I had to add a little bit of shimmer, so I just grabbed my clear Wink of Stella, which this one is almost completely dead. It's more liquid than glitter, but it works for this. It just gives it that tiny bit of shimmer without being ridiculous, because a card like this, in my opinion, you don't want like a ton of glitter and bling. But yeah, I added just a little bit, tried to keep her tone down, and yeah, like I said, this was the last time I was able to use this Wink of Stella before finally opening a new one, because it was completely empty. And yeah, I had to add a little bit to her shoes because, come on, like, they're fun. I love the little red peep toes. So Added all of that, and then to just the apple, I took out my glossy accents and added a coat of that so it's all nice and shiny and just gives it that little extra something. And then that was it for this card. So as always, there will be info in the description box below the video. There will be the link to my blog post with all the pictures and the links to the supplies, as well as all the supplies. There's links to my Twitter and Facebook and all that fun stuff, so you guys can find me all over the interwebs. So make sure to check out the description box below. And thumbs up this video if you liked it, and thank you all for watching, and I'll see you all next time. Bye!